1944 fascist-occupied Italy. Wealthy men of power form an agreement and gather young men and young women at a palace for their own perverse interests. In a structure not unlike Dante Alighieri's Inferno, the levels of depravity are separated into 3 circles, each circle delving further into grotesquerie more than the last. This is Pier Paolo Pasolini's infamous Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom, an adaptation of the Marquis de Sade's book. Like the book, the film has often been the cause of much outrage and is still highlighted as one of the most controversial and disturbing films of all time, a notorious credit given to it by numerous all-time disturbing film lists online. Despite the challenging nature of the film, filmmakers from John Waters to Gaspar Noé have celebrated it as an Arthouse film classic. The film understandably earns the title of one of the most disturbing films of all time by reveling in graphic depictions of sex, rape, coprophilia, and intense violence, such as a scene where a young woman is tricked into eating a meal that contains nails, and torture, a subject which the film's final circle, titled The Circle of Blood, comes to explore. Despite the film's graphic nature and the polarizing response the film often receives, there is meaning to be gained from the disgust this film raises. Noel Murray, writing for the AV Club, states that Pasolini marries the perverse visions of the Marquis de Sade with the decadence of Italy's fascist era, trapping the audience in a ritzy Italian mansion with an assortment of naked young people, and the coolly philosophical aristocrats who torment them. The movie comments on the degradation of the human spirit by subjecting its characters to some of the most nauseating sexual encounters ever simulated on film. Pasolini's adaptation of the Marquis de Sade's novel, one he wrote while imprisoned in the Bastille, and is reflective of his own scandalous lifestyle, melded with fascist-occupied Italy, Mussolini's ruling as the backdrop, is ambitious, and when connected with, as Noel Murray stated, the degradation of the human spirit, it is difficult not to connect this degradation with the oppressive dictatorial regime of Mussolini. The degradation of Pasolini's film, another extremity imposed on its victims by an oppressive force which they are unable to escape, seems to be a commentary about how disgusting dictatorial rulership truly is. Gary Indiana, in his book on Pasolini's Salò, published by the British Film Institute, explicitly states that there is something absurdly winning about Pasolini's explanation of the shit-eating in Salò as a commentary on processed foods, and the fact that Pasolini was being sincere when he said it. Critics quite often mistake the celebration of the ghastly as an indictment of contemporary malaise. In other words, they can only like something if it can be bent to reflect their own moral certainties. Gary Indiana suggests that Pasolini had suggested that the coprophilia depicted in his film is a commentary on processed foods. Such a connection can make sense. Processed foods are often cited as harmful to our health, the British National Health Service website stating that eating a lot of processed foods can increase the risk of cancer, yet processed foods are available with such ease and frequency, not dissimilar to our fecal matter. If Pasolini's intention was to connect these scenes of coprophilia with the eating of processed foods, he is clearly stating that our diets are basically crap. When Gary Indiana states that critics can only like something if it can be bent to reflect their own moral certainties, he is suggesting that even a film like Salò is challenging to appreciate, it should not be dismissed as an example of trash cinema. Just because the film does not reflect our standards to what is good and tasteful does not mean the film is lacking meaning. Not every film must be a form of escapism. Ugliness is a necessity in art to illustrate the depths of evil that have been experienced. Even if the depravity in Pasolini's film is exaggerated and gratuitous, it is sincere. Dictatorial rule still exists, and the victims of such ruling suffer under such extreme regimes, whether it is Hassan al-Bolkiah, the Sultan of Brunei, and his anti-LGBTQ laws, or Maduro of Venezuela and his blasé attitude towards his own country's economic crisis. These dictators and evils are exaggerated with Salò, a film that makes us watch as evils unfold. But this is necessary. As unpleasant as the film becomes, it is always going to be relevant. We, as the viewer, should be aware that such evils can exist, even if it challenges what we consider good in the world. In conclusion, Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salò, or 120 Days of Sodom, understandably earns its title as one of the most disturbing films of all time. However, to only see this film as a spectacle of shock value undermines the meanings and intentions behind such shocking imagery. From the connection and criticism Pasolini might be making of processed foods while depicting coprophilia, to the connection of fascism and dictatorships, this film, no matter how shocking and vile, is incredibly relevant and, unfortunately, as long as evil exists, will stay incredibly relevant.